Welcome back for another OG Show Live. Mr. Randall, how you doing?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Reel Down.
Welcome back to another episode of Bass Fishing for News.
Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to, once again, the Bass Kayak Adventures.
Brother, this is the final cast.
Another segment of Chasing the Tide, your saltwater connection on the paddle pin.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Feather and Fur. Your host, Brad.
Welcome back to the Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Crystal.
Hey, welcome back to Off the Water. Happy
Q here with Adventures of Outdoor Woman podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to the Rusty Hook Kayak Fishing Podcast.
We're brought to you by Pelican, built tough for all situations. Go to pelican.com. Eastport Marina on the beautiful shores of Dale Hollow Lake. For all your lodging, kayaking, go to eastport.info. Yak Gadget for all your fine kayak fishing accessory needs. Go to yakgadget.com. What's going on, Facebook Live, YouTube listeners of the podcast? Welcome, Mr. Randall.
Mr. Schiller.
I'm just going to call you Elk.
Elk. Call me Elk Randall.
You're like an elk attractant, it seems like lately.
They're everywhere, dude. Oh, well, apparently where I am. Yeah. Can't get away. Trying to escape this weekend. We'll see.
We'll talk a little bit about it tonight during the podcast because I know you had some interesting encounters with some very large animals. So,
Yeah.
But it should be fun, man. We got. I was looking back. I'm like, man, who have we not had on the podcast lately? That's just a badass, and we need to get back on, you know. And I was scrolling through, like I went back to the start of Paddle and Fin, and then like started scrolling. I'm like, we've talked to them. We've talked to, dude. We haven't talked to Tanner in forever, and it seems like every time I open up Facebook, I see some badass photos of him, you know, out adventuring around in the wilderness of Iowa, which, you know, Iowa, we think corn, but
Oh, dude.
yeah,
It's there's so much more there to offer. Or Iowa has so much to offer that people just don't realize.
sure.
And, I mean, I've been out there with Tanner before, but Tanner, in my opinion, is like a true outdoorsman. Every season, this dude is out there. He's doing it. And he does interesting stuff too. So it's not it's not like your typical I would say not easy, but more like to the not so tough fisherman or hunter.
Sure.
Guy that likes to walk off 10 feet off the road and hunt. That's not Tanner. I can tell you right now, that's not Tanner. But yeah, definitely. Let's get him on here.
Yeah, let's we'll bring Tanner in here and hear about what he's been up to, what he's been doing, and just catch up, man. It'll be exciting. I know he's been catching some nice trout out there, obviously bass, and that's the thing too. He's a multi-species guy, so that's like one thing I love about him. You know, he's not nailed down to like one particular thing. So let's get the man in the house, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tanner Speidel.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks.
Did I say your last name right?
Yeah, you're good.
All right. I never know. I'm like, is it Speidel?
Speedle.
Speidel. Yeah. Everybody gets it wrong, but I'm used to it. So it's okay.
I hear you, man.
You guys aren't wrong about thinking Iowa's the land of corn. It's corn central around here, and right now they're harvesting. So if you're going down the highway, there's going to be a combine or a couple of tractors hauling some corn. So
leave early.
Yeah, leave early. But everything has been great here. Fishing has been absolutely incredible this season, but we haven't got a lot of rain. So pretty much the lakes, the streams, the ponds, everything, the rivers are low. So fish in the rivers are kind of confined to really certain areas because not a lot of places can hold fish. But this summer, my goal has been to see as many rivers as I can. I always kind of fish in the same rivers a lot, and I just wanted to see some new stuff. So I set a goal. So every weekend since early July, I've been trying new stretches of different rivers around Iowa that I've never done before. and it's just been crazy. And, most people take advantage of these places, or they don't take advantage of these places rather. So it's like I've only met people on 2 trips the entire summer, and most of them, weren't even fishing. So it was like, holy smokes, do people not even research, or do they not even care about these rivers? But it's been great.
No, that's definitely cool, man, that you've kind of made it a goal to hit a different body of water every weekend. Like, and that's phenomenal. And like Jay and I have had that conversation about the public land in Wisconsin, and even a lot of it in Illinois too. Like, a lot of people don't realize that that's there, or they shy away from it because they think, well, it's public land, everybody's going to be there, so it's going to be overrun or this or that. And like, I mean, Jay, how many times have we gone hunting, or even fishing in some areas and not seen a person all day? Like, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we'll call that pre-COVID. As soon as COVID happened, I don't know, man, it was tucked away. I mean, granted, there are some more tucked away spots, but I remember specifically kayak fishing one day, and party boater or whatever party floaters came flying. I mean, like hundreds, and just like,
oh yeah.
We'll just have lunch. Like, we'll just have lunch now.
Right,
like, how'd they know about this river? Like, how'd they even know?
Okay, I want to say something funny. There's actually a couple rivers that I do fish when there's a lot of people, because when there's a lot of people, like, not necessarily fishing, but just like floating, and when they're partying, they kind of like push the fish to certain areas of the river. So it's funny, like, they'll be like, "Why are you casting towards me?" or whatever. And it's like, I'm not casting towards you. You're pushing the smallmouth like right to where I am. And it's paid off a couple of times, but that's like, I don't advise going and fishing where a bunch of people are. It sucks.
Yeah.
But it's just funny that they kind of do push the fish. I mean, if it was a trout, it'd be out of there and you'd never see that fish again. But smallmouth, they're not as shy.
Sure.
But
sure.
One thing I want to touch on is, like, in all my posts, you guys probably see me like hashtag driftless area.
Yep.
Well, the northeast portion of Iowa is considered the driftless region, and there's also a portion of Wisconsin and Illinois and Minnesota that are in the driftless region too. But glaciers never traveled over that area, so it's still the rugged topography that it's been for, close to 1 million years. And most of Iowa is totally flattened by glaciers, so
sure,
they don't have the beautiful features that northeastern Iowa has. And most of the rivers in northeastern Iowa are spring fed, so we can actually have trout in a lot of these northernmost rivers, and it's really a treat. And for years, I was just staying on trout streams and stuff because that's where the trout are. But I've been investigating all these rivers in the region too, and finding out that they are stuffed full of trout, just like the streams. And one thing is for sure, that I'm not going to stream fish anymore. If I can go kayak for trout, that's what I'm going to do.
Heck yeah.
And I fished in Wyoming before to catch trout, and that was just breathtaking. But being able to do it in Iowa is kind of like something I never really thought I'd be doing, and just totally crushed it.
Yeah, it's super. That whole driftless area is just super unique and beautiful. You touched on it, right? Like the glaciers never flattened it out like the rest of the Midwest. And when I got into fly fishing, I started fly fishing the driftless, up in that southwest Wisconsin area. And I think they still do it. I haven't gone up in a few years, but they used to close their season in the winter, but Iowa kept it open. So like, we were like, oh, well, it's going to be 50 degrees this weekend in the middle of February. Let's go to Iowa. And I was completely floored, right? Like, usually when I drive through Iowa, I'm on, what is it, 80 or 88? It's 80. Yeah.
It's 80, yeah.
Go through 80 and like you cross the Mississippi and then it goes straight to cornfields, man, all the way through Nebraska on the way to Colorado, but you get up in that northern part of Iowa and it is so beautiful, like bluffs, rolling hills. That like you said, the terrain is super unique.
Yeah, the technical term for that area is a Paleozoic plateau. and it's just really unique. I mean, there's people just in my area of Iowa that aren't really like even aware of what that is up there, and it just baffles me because we've got such a little piece of paradise up there.
For sure, for sure. I mean, if you guys are listening or watching and you're from like the South or out west or maybe the Northeast, like I mean, picture like upstate New York, right? But like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just a fan of our area. I think it's more beautiful here, but whatever. But but it's kind of similar to that, like, Vermont, New Hampshire, like upstate New York, like that upper Northeast area, like is what it really reminds me of.
But this summer I did close to 120 miles of river, which not really. I mean, when you think about, it might take a few hours to fish a mile sometimes. You might find a good hole and spend 3 hours there. So just 120 miles might have been many, many hours of actually fishing. But I've ridden my bike about 60 miles in my shuttles, and it's kind of fun doing this because I researched my stretches really well on Onyx, and I figure out like where I'm going to park my bicycle.
Sure.
And one thing I never do is I never look at the elevation of my rides on the shuttle because I don't want to I'm not going to do that stretch because there's a bunch of big hills, and this is a really hilly area too. I just kind of surprise myself when I go there because I don't want to not do a stretch just because I'm going to have to work on the way back. But it's kind of cool. You get 2 different trips. You get your kayak fishing trip and you get your bicycle ride pretty much on gravel roads or whatever. So it's really neat. I've seen a lot of stuff just on my bike ride back. But another thing that's funny is people see me out in the middle of nowhere in my bicycle. And I'm not really one to ride a bicycle on a road. I like trails and stuff. And they're just like, what the heck's this kid doing out here? They have no idea that I'm probably kayak fishing and shuttling back through their area because nobody does it. And I think people are going to start to catch on in a few of the stretches just because how simple it is to shuttle with a bicycle and, lock your stuff up or carry whatever important stuff with you back to your truck. But it's just a lot of fun.
That's super cool. Well, you do some cool stuff too, because you got that little enduro dirt bike too, right? Like where you're doing a lot of backwoodsy, backcountry type stuff too, right?
Well, I've got a Kawasaki KLR 650 and a Versus 650, but the KLR had really big plans this summer. I was going to ride the Trans-Wisconsin Adventure Trail, but I got too hooked into kayaking these rivers, so I never got to it. But I have ridden a lot on my enduro bike. It's a lot of fun, but I need to take it somewhere other than, a 500-mile radius around here because there's just cooler stuff a little farther out.
Sure. No, that's cool. I've never heard of that trail before. What's that all about?
It's a pretty cool trail. It starts in Illinois actually, and it ends up at Lake Superior. A lot of people do it. It's kind of got a bad acronym if you think about what Trans-Wisconsin Adventure Trail comes to, but otherwise it's a really, really fun time. I've done a lot of research, just haven't pulled the trigger and taken a few days. My plan would always be to burn it up, check out Lake Superior, probably go to Duluth and maybe a little bit further, and then just burn it back down on hard tops because I'm gonna be a little tired after that ride.
Oh,
it's like a three-day comfortable ride up there at least, so I could probably come back in a day.
You ever been up to Duluth?
Yeah, I have. I love it up there. It's just beautiful.
Have you been beyond there, and gone more north?
Yeah, I've been up to the Gunflint Trail, and my dad's taken me there on vacation a few times, but every time we go, it's late in the fall, and the fish are out deep, and I never had any luck fishing. I always need to go back to the Northwoods for redemption up there. But
yeah, that's a nice stretch. I mean, I guess I've never driven in California, but I would compare it to how the views probably look in California when you're driving along the lake, which would be the ocean in California.
Right.
But I mean, how it winds in and out. It's got the cliffs, and it's pretty. Too. It's still pretty mountainous up there, which is kind of neat. A lot of rugged rocks.
Yeah, there's in the UP, there's the Porcupine Mountains. Those are pretty cool, but they're just kind of like not mountains like a person from out west would think of, but mountains for us flatlanders.
Yeah. Anything that's like bigger than like a foot off the ground, that's a mountain.
Oh my gosh.
That's what we call mountains. You know, people.
If you gain 100 feet in elevation, you just went up the mountain.
I love when they call them like bluffs. They're like, no, that's a mountain.
Yeah. And we've got a lot of cool bluffs in the driftless region. Like I've had to hike up to some, like quite a few without trails, and it's always a good time. And believe it or not, but we actually have timber rattlers in the northeastern part of Iowa. They're really rare, but we do have a small population of them.
Yeah, I know you. I think we talked about that on the last show. How much you run into snakes because you kind of work in wells and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. This last fall, the property owner was taking down their well pit. They were going to move the system inside, and there was like 100 fox snakes that had a nest in this well pit. Well, I saved like every one that I could, and I took them to another place that they could winter at. And everybody there was deathly afraid of them. And it was cold outside, so these things were really inactive. And I was literally grabbing handfuls of snakes, putting them in a bucket, and taking them. My dad and I took them somewhere else. But
let me
those
just tell
people
you,
were just gonna use the excavator and dig them up, and I wasn't about that. Yeah,
Is this the one?
Brian would love to help you next time.
No, I'll pass.
Those things wouldn't even try to bite you. They were really inactive and just trying to stay warm. But I like snakes. I think they're cool. I know in the southern snakes, I wouldn't want to be going around playing with snakes. You'd end up in the hospital. But here in Iowa, we're pretty fortunate. And for all the people saying that I saw a water moccasin in Iowa, no, you didn't. There's no water moccasins here.
Yeah, it's I know most of the snakes up here are pretty harmless, you know. There are a few, you know, like you mentioned, the rattlers and things like that can get a little hairy, right? But yeah, I remember that. That's one thing I remember from our last podcast. You were talking about those things and my skin was just like crawling. I'm like, oh,
dude,
no.
I was walking around the woods up here and I'm like, I mean, it's been getting pretty cold, so I'm pretty sure they're not out, but still, like, I'm still thinking like a northerner and just trotting around the woods. Like, not a, you know,
not paying attention. Yeah.
Nothing's gonna get me. It's like, you would think I would have learned that lesson already once, but, you know, like the woods are out to get you, everybody. Stay out of the woods.
No, it's wild, man. I mean, it's crazy how we have these different species, or I guess it's same species but different types, and it's like you can go, you know, 12 hours south and there's a whole different type that could kill you, you know. So it's crazy. Like I always, like anytime I go out west, like Vegas, things like that, like I always like to go out to like Red Rock Canyon, Hoover Dam, things like that, and walk around a little bit. And I always got to remember, like, oh shit, there's rattlesnakes out here. Like you should be scanning the ground, paying attention to what's going on in your surroundings. You know what I mean? Like you just never know. But
yeah, I did a wilderness first aid course last winter, and the instructor has a place down in Arkansas. And he was talking about how he bought a cabin out there, and he took like 3 dozen poisonous snakes out from underneath of his cabin, like the first night that he came back after a long weekend of being away. It was just like, you don't mess with the snakes there. And I just can't even imagine that, just because the snakes here are so harmless. But
sure.
Oh my gosh. And, you know, our friends in Australia and stuff, we kind of give them a hard time. Jay, you know who I'm talking about. And I'm always giving them a hard time about snakes and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, they got that crazy spider season.
Oh, yeah.
In Australia?
Oh, my God, dude.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
Dude. Oh.
Like, it looks like there's no, like, the parks. Like, the one thing I think we've all seen this picture, too. They show a picnic table in a park, and it is covered. Like, you can barely see the picnic table, and I'm like, that's horrifying. I don't know.
Not me.
It's like they got those funnel spiders out there too.
Yeah, those are kind of freaky.
Yeah.
I saw some pretty big spiders on the river trips this year, but they don't really bother me. I just scoop them off with the paddle. You have those big, like the hunter spiders along the water's edge. Those things are like a wolf spider on steroids.
Oh my god, they got those in Florida, dude. Like, there was one at this house we were staying at. The guy literally tells me, he goes, "Cause we were staying at someone's house," and he's like, "Hey, if you see a big brown spider, don't worry, it won't bite you." I'm like, "What do you mean a big? Wait, whoa. I was like, "What do you mean a big brown spider?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it's just like one of the huntsman spiders. It's they like to hang out like in the showers." I'm like, "So I'm not taking a shower this weekend? Like, what's going on?" And he's like, literally, he said this thing was crawling around the house. I never saw it, thank God. But those things can get as big as dinner plates. Like, I mean, I'm okay with spiders to an extent, but something like that, dude, I don't know.
Man.
Even if it ain't gonna bite me,
I feel like spiders as long as they're not like where I'm sleeping.
Yeah. I mean, I was in New Mexico. When I lived in New Mexico, there was tarantulas. That wasn't such a big deal, I guess, but check your shoes. Check your shoes.
Yeah, but I want to tell you about some of the rivers that I've been on this season, though. I've been doing this little river called the Volga River, and it's a beautiful little river. I've done like probably close to 20 miles of that so far, and it is really, really hard to float because it averages like a foot deep, and that's like giving it a little bit. And but you'll be on that river, and there's just it's pretty much rock bottom the entire time, like flat rock shelf bottom, and all the rocks there are really, really jagged and stuff. Like, it's just a really rugged little area. Like, dragging your kayak your poor kayak's going to take a little abuse there, but it'll just be flat nothing, and you'll catch a lot of little itty bitty smallmouth and some rock bass and stuff. But then you'll get into a big hole. Then you'll see a smallmouth bass that are like 18 and bigger. Like, you can just see them and know compared to what you've been catching.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so finicky, like a trout. And if you float in on them in your kayak and you see those smallmouth, they see you and it's game over. I hardly caught any of those big smallmouth, but like, I know in those rivers, like if I floating downstream, if I see a good hole up ahead, I'll just anchor and just bomb casts out there and hope that a small one doesn't get my bait first and teach the big one a lesson. But it's been wild. Like, most people go to that river and be like, "Oh, dinker, 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 dinker. Like, this is just a river full of small fish." But if they floated it and saw those holes, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, that smallmouth was the biggest one I've ever seen." And it blew my mind the first time. Like, I wasn't expecting to see bass of that size, but the more you know, and you go and see the offbeat places.
Well, and that requires your travel, like to explore, because like you said, I think some of the more accessible spots are going to be like super shallow, like off roads and whatnot. And I mean, you got to go to the holes. That's where, that's where all the bigger stuff's going to be. So unless you're willing to, trek into there and get a little adventure, like the Muskegon River is a lot like that, where it's got, it'll be shallow. And then there's this crazy deep hole. That's, at least like 12 feet deep. I mean, and we've seen it on the Collins together, kind of the same deal, where it's, all those bigger fish are just, in those areas. And if you're not willing to trek out there, you won't see them.
No. And all these rivers that I've been fishing, they're pretty much crystal clear too. So, and that's a real treat for Iowa, because the vast majority of the rivers, they're pretty turbid, but it's cool. I don't know where I went to I do all my research on onyx and stuff. So I'm just looking at the segments on aerials, and, you get a pretty good idea on everything. You can put the topo on there and you can tell, like, that's a good little valley through there. And, you're probably going to see some bluffs and cool features. But I got to this one park, and I saw the park ranger. And if I ever see a ranger at any of the parks, like, I go and stop and talk to them and just tell them, like, "Hey, if you see me in the area, I'm just kayak fishing these rivers," or whatever, like, introduce myself. And, just so if they see your truck down at the river, nobody's around overnight, or, they just have a general idea what you're doing. But I asked him about this stretch. I was like, how many people kayak or canoe this? Like, this must be super popular because this is beautiful. And he's like, "Well, you're probably the first person that's going to, the first person I've seen doing it, this year." And I'm just like, "Really?" Because that was the most beautiful my whole season. That was the most beautiful little stretch that I did. And it might not have been, I caught probably close to 100 rock bass. No, not really much size, but it was still like the best, most beautiful little stretch of river I did all year. And him saying that nobody's been there, it was just
That's
like
crazy.
And it's just absolutely wild. But like I said, most people be like, yeah, don't go there, you'll just catch small fish. And most of the time people don't know what they're talking about.
Well, just think too, you may have caught, what you probably did, fish that have never been caught.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That could be true to an extent. I do know I have some older fishing friends here in Iowa, and they're big river rats too. They're mostly fly fishing and stuff, but not totally. But they've been to a lot of these rivers, and I'm kind of just like, in some of the spots I'm walking in their footsteps, but they've been asking me on Facebook, like, where are you been fishing, catching those fish? So it's like, those guys don't recognize some of these features that I've been posting. It was like, I'm doing some good things. Like,
yeah,
I've got some pretty good idols to follow in their footsteps and hopefully be like them someday.
That's cool, man. I used to follow a guy up in Wisconsin, and it was cool, man, because you had like a lot of the guys, this was back when forums were like a thing, you know what I mean? And, guys, all the fly fishermen would get upset with this guy because he was fishing these areas and, taking pictures, posting them and stuff. And a lot of the fly fishing guys were like, why are you posting that? You're going to ruin that spot. And it was funny, and he put it right there on the forum board, and he's like, you know what? If somebody finds this spot, good for them, because I know how big of a pain it is to get back there, by foot. And, and that's just it. A lot of people don't want that effort, to get back to those spots. And I think we all miss out on a lot of beautiful things, like you're saying, like one of the best stretches of streams you paddled all season, and the the park rangers telling you like, yeah, nobody's paddled this, like, you're probably the only one. That's pretty cool, man. There's something to be said about that.
It's people just take some of the best stuff for granted, and it's cool to go and figure it out for yourself that it's way better than you expected. But this past weekend, I floated a mile, and I did 3 floats this past weekend. And the first day, I did this pretty big float, and I wasn't quite satisfied. The next morning, I did a small section of a river that had this tiny little segment that I needed to do, and I did the whole upper portion of it. And I actually kind of waded upstream with my kayak to get to this pool, and I caught 2 really big trout, like my first few casts, and it was like, oh, my whole day is made now. I kind of like got some of the trout that I wanted. I'm making a trout video, and this was gonna, all these big trout help. So I was like, I have the whole day to spend. Well, I floated that little segment. It was kind of fishy, little trout. It was really scenic, but not very fishy. Then after that, I got a wild hair to drive an hour and a half north to float downstream a mile and a half to fish this one area, only to paddle back up a mile and a half. It was a place that I've had that goal to do it there for quite a long time. And it was just like the time I was just always busy doing other stuff in that area. I didn't want to do that little stretch. I get to the boat landing, and I'm looking down at the bottom, and that water is just rolling. And I'm just like, I go and walk and look downstream. Like, okay, there's some slack water along the banks. I'll be able to paddle against that. And I floated down to the spot I wanted to catch trout at, and I lost a big one right off the bat, of course, but I got really good GoPro footage of it, so at least I have a little bit of it. And I ended up catching a few other big trout, and the paddle back was pretty horrible, but it's one of those times where you're so happy that you just caught some big fish. You're kind of laughing the whole way. And I drove home smiling from that one too, but it's just cool to push the envelope on stuff you thought would have been too hard or, too difficult to try to do by yourself. And thankfully, sometimes I have my best friend to help me out with some of these trips, but most all the time I'm solo. So I got to plan ahead and figure out how I'm all doing this stuff down to a T. Otherwise I can kind of get myself into trouble sometimes.
what kind of got you into like just going off and exploring this stuff? Was it like something like you did as a kid, or is
Well,
it just curiosity got the best of you and you just started scoping it?
both my parents are really outdoorsy, and always took me outside as a kid and stuff. But both my parents are really independent too. Um, we just kind of like doing our own thing, and most people would complain or, oh, most people just aren't about getting out of the truck and walking a path, And my parents always has taught me to do what I like doing. When I was a really little kid, my parents would get phone calls from other parents in town, like, your son's down at the river fishing by himself or something like that's ridiculous. And my parents would be like, he's fishing, like he's fine. Like, we know what I didn't need a babysitter. I was, dunking worms all day. I was pretty primitive at that point, but I was still fishing a lot.
Sure.
It's just never changed. And both my parents have done a lot of crazy trips and stuff. And it's just like, I always try to like be like one up in them. I mean, they've traveled a lot around the country, a lot more than I have. I'm kind of like stuck around the Midwest pretty much.
Sure.
But I try to like explore everything around here. So it's kind of cooler to know your homeroom like the back of your hands. But I've been trying to like see all these other rivers that I haven't been to before. So it's like my range and knowledge of all these rivers around eastern Iowa is just getting better and better.
Well, yeah, and I was kind of curious about that. You mentioned your folks, and I've seen some photos that you've posted recently that, like you did a float trip with your mom and another
That
one
was the
with your.
best.
What's that?
That was the absolute best.
Yeah, it's cool to see that. Like, I saw that photo and I was like, man, I wish I could get my folks in a kayak. Like, there's no way my old man would flip over and be drenched before we even like pushed off the shore. It'd be like carrying the boat, he'd trip and fall into the water, and that would ruin it. But it's super cool, man. And it's awesome to see, your folks, still out there getting it and, going out with you and sharing time on the water. And I know that's one thing I've really valued these past like year and a half, being able to fish with the old man again out on the water, dude. It's so cool. So cool.
Yep, I've got some awesome parents. They used to do a lot of canoeing and stuff. My dad always dunked the canoe. It's kind of weird for them to get on fishing kayaks and be like, weird, you don't dunk these things like you would. But it's great. I love taking my dad fishing. My dad is my biggest sponsor. Not gonna lie, my dad has always helped me with anything I've ever been into, and just thankfully I have parents that are really supportive of all the stuff that I do. It's great. I really love them.
That's awesome, man. That's super cool. Super cool, man. I definitely feel you on that. So like you're doing a lot of this stuff by yourself. Like let's get some valuable life lessons out of this, right? Like what are some things you've learned where you've like maybe got into some hairy spots, where it's like, oh no, I might be in a little bit of trouble? Or what are you doing to prevent yourself from getting to that point?
Oh gosh, it's hard to say. I'm the type of person that always learns the lesson the hard way.
Sure.
So I get in a hairy situation once, and it's kind of like I always prepare for that afterwards. But biggest thing is keeping everything tight in your kayak. I mean, if you do dump, you don't lose everything. In my truck, as soon as it starts cooling off, I'm always taking, the dry clothes and towels and stuff. You don't want to wear a cotton on the water ever. That's just a no-no. You're going to be cold and damp the whole rest of the time. I take a dry box with like a fire starter, signal flares, an emergency blanket, just all the little rudimentary survival gear. I have the whole plethora of stuff in my truck for actual camping, but I do carry my little survival kit in my kayak. If I'm ever with a friend, we always have walkie-talkies. That's a really big thing. A lot of the times we get separated, and if I come across a deadfall or something, I'm going to radio my buddy and be like, hey, warn them, because there's sometimes people get into hairy situations.
Sure.
On a lot of these little rivers that I've been on, there's been a lot of blind, hairy corners and stuff. So you'll come around a blind corner, there'll be a deadfall, and it's just like never a fun time. That particular instance was on the Yellow River in Iowa, which is the fastest flowing river in Iowa, plus has the highest elevation drop out of any river in Iowa.
Whew.
And it was just crazy. It's just looks like a little trout stream, but it's just got a lot of water moving at all times. I think it typically runs at like 150 to 200 cubic feet per minute, and it's just a beautiful place. But it runs fast enough that if you get into a hairy predicament like a deadfall or whatever, you got to think really fast.
Yeah, I mean, guys that fish like normal, like wide rivers, like they may not think 100 or 200 CFS is, a lot, but when you're on a small stream like that water's moving, man. You got to keep that in mind, like, or account for that, like the width and the depth of that stream. So I like I told you earlier, man, like I've fly fished a couple of those streams and they're not super deep, and they're not super wide. Like there's somewhere you could like virtually jump across,
Yeah, for sure. But another important thing that I recommend is like always let somebody know where you're at. Hopefully do it before the trip. A lot of these places don't have reception, so try to do that beforehand. But one thing that I've started to do is leaving notes in the window of my truck, letting people know what I do. Mm-hmm. I've had people call the cops on me before of where I'm parked and, they don't know what I'm doing. And I'll leave a note like, hey, this is Tanner Speidel. I'm fishing. Here's my phone number. Please call me with any issues or anything like that, just so I don't have the sheriff's department call me thinking that I'm stranded out on the river somewhere, because it happened once last July and it was it was a funny situation, but it could have been avoided if I would have left a note. So just another thing. It's good to let people know, like your family and friends, know where you're going before your river trips, just so if something did happen, people have a general idea of where you're at.
We got to hear that story. But before we do, like, I'm glad you mentioned that, because something that's been like hitting me pretty hard this past week is the Seek One guys. If you guys aren't familiar with them, they do, a YouTube channel. It's mostly focused on bow hunting, and they had a guy on I think it was last week, and this dude didn't tell anybody where he was going. Like, told his family he was going hunting, and but didn't tell them where. They knew like a general area, but this area was a couple square miles, right? And dude went up, got in his tree stand, was going to buckle in, and like tree stand wiggled, stepped out of the tree stand, fell, hit a branch on the way down, which broke his back, and then when he hit the ground, it broke his neck. And he laid there for what was it, Jay? Like 2 days or something?
Yeah,
before they found him.
He busted up some ribs, and he did a lot more than just the back of the neck. Like that's not I wouldn't say that's not the worst of it, but
no. But it paralyzed him.
Happened. Yeah,
and he had his phone in his pocket, but couldn't move.
Get it. He said it was getting cold at night, and he couldn't. He just tried to like move himself, but he's like he couldn't even do that to stay warm. And
that's terrible.
Yeah, and he said he was thinking about like, because you hear about the stories, because there are plenty out there about coyotes finding you, and
sure,
there's a similar one where about an older guy that fell out of a tree, didn't tell him where he was going, broke his leg, and then he's an older guy, and he basically had to end up crawling out there, but coyotes found him, and he had to fight off coyotes. So so it's like there's all this. Because like you enter the food chain, right? Like we think we're at the top, but you get hurt. Like you have now entered the food chain. Depending on where you're at.
Yeah, it was just it really hit home, because like I'll go out hunting or fishing, sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going up to Wisconsin because I live on the Illinois-Wisconsin border, right? And Wisconsin can mean a lot of different places, and my wife knows like the general area, but You know, I remember last year I started sending her pins from my Onyx, like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm going to be. I'll call you when I get in the truck and I'm on the way home, and we can figure out dinner or something. But I did it more for, you know, hey, if something were to happen, you know where to come pick up my body at least. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's one of those things you don't really think about sometimes, you know, like it used to be the same when I fished tournaments. You know, I would shoot a pin to my wife or my old man and just be like, hey, you know, this is where I'm going to launch today. You know, I'm going to go scope out this area of the lake just in case something, you know, because a lot of times I was pre-fishing by myself, things like that. Like, you never know what could happen, you know, especially in a unfamiliar place too.
Yeah. I mean, even moving to Tennessee, I do the same thing. You know, like where my tree stand's going to be or where I'm going to scope. I always leave those coordinates now. And the thing I've always found, you know, when you go out is you always get hurt doing the most mundane things.
Sure.
It's never like I've done some stupid crap with Brian, like where I've had to like scale stuff I just would never do with my bow and everything. Like, I mean, we've just been in some nutty stuff, and everything worked out. And I remember talking to myself like, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. And I'm like telling myself this as I'm doing it. But you know, that would fine. But it's always like this stupid little things that you just don't like tripping on like a root.
Sure.
I mean, that could take you out. You just don't realize, you know, or doing something stupid like, you know, oh, man, I'm even sorry to say, you know, almost stabbing myself with my own broadhead. You know, just not thinking about, and we're talking about in the armpit, which is pretty much death. That's death. I mean, that's in 2 minutes you're gone. You know what I mean? But it's like stuff like that. I mean, and obviously nobody's going to save you at that point, but at least they know where to come get you. But point being is there's so much that can happen from your own decisions, from nature just reaching out and grabbing you. I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen out there ever. And if you're alone, you got to have like some kind of a backup plan, or at least have somebody know where you're at. I mean,
sure.
I just don't see any other way of going into the woods these days without doing that.
We got a Rami Yak Bass in the house. Hope you're good, man. But he says he does the same when he heads out solo. He sends his wife or a cousin a pin. You just never know. So yeah, man,
be safe and let other people know where you're at.
Yeah, well, and especially like you're talking, man, like you're out exploring rivers, and like you said, you come around a blind corner and there's a huge strainer there, man. Like that could be a really, really hairy scenario.
Oh, for sure. If you get your stuff tangled, if you get your kayak tangled, most of that, like how would you ever get it out? Like by yourself, like you might not see your kayak ever again in some of those places. And I've had to pull a swamp kayak out of a river before, and I needed like 6 slings and a come along, and it took me a long time. And after I got the kayak out of the river, over the bank, and then it took me a while just to flip it over and get all the water out of it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's crazy, man. So how did you get yourself stuck out there one time last season?
Get stuck, or you mean when the sheriffs came to find me?
When the sheriff came to find you?
Well, I was just camping along the river. Really popular. Well, not popular, but it's a notorious good river. And I'm just camping along the river like I always would. And it's like midnight. I'm sitting there in my hammock, and I hear something driving down the trail. I'm like, okay, there's some kids out riding a side-by-side. And all I see is lights and just headlights. And all of a sudden the guys get off and they're like, hey, are you Tanner? And I'm like, yeah, what's up, guys? And, I figured they saw my truck covered with stickers and were locals and knew who I was. And they're like, we've been looking for it. I was like, why? Then I look and see there was 3 sheriffs on a side-by-side. Like, we've been trying to find you for hours. I'm like, for what? Is my family okay? Is everything all right? And they're like, no, we thought something happened to you. It was kind of suspicious that you were parked there. And my fishing rods and everything are like, all my stuff's like perfectly set up for the morning. And I was like, no, I'm just going fishing in the morning, camping here. And they're like, really? Like, they never seen anybody do that there.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that?
Like you're not. Why aren't you sitting on your couch in your house?
Yeah,
That's how people fish these days.
Yeah, right.
it was 4th of July, so they had no idea what was going on there. But,
Sure.
well, they just kind of said, well, have a good night or whatever. And they drove off laughing. And it was funny. That trail was really hairy and they had to back up for like 1,000 feet before they could even turn that thing around. But they were laughing the whole way. And afterwards, I'm just sitting there like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
And afterwards, like, that's what sparked me to write the thing on my truck. Like, the sheriff could have called me and they could have said whatever, like, you can't camp or whatever it may be, or just, what are you doing? And I would gladly told them, and, oh, I'll come talk to you if you whatever, it's fine. But that's what led me to start leaving notes on stuff. It was funny.
Well, at the same aspect too, that's kind of got to be reassuring too, right? Like there's people watching out for people in those areas. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's not the greatest thing to just, you're in your element out in the middle of nowhere, and now you got 3 sheriffs knocking on your hammock. But
you got Karens in the woods.
But
the thing about this particular situation was that there was a really fancy house kind of by where I was, and I'm willing to bet that they just called the cops that there was somebody parked at this park.
Always the rich people.
Yeah.
I know. They're like, I don't know, man.
We want to know now, but
yeah.
It was fine. Nothing became of it. So it was just kind of a weird night because I camp every weekend and have never had any issues ever. And that was the one time that cops stopped me. But
that's wild, though, that they were searching for you for hours, man.
The one thing that was kind of a nuisance was they called, like, they ran my number, found my family. They called like all my family at like 1, or it was like midnight or 1 a.m. I was like, really? You called my mom at 1 a.m. asking about me? I was like, oh, she's going to be so upset.
I'm going to get in trouble for my mom where I don't live anymore.
By sheriffs.
I know. Why are the cops calling me? What'd you do?
Yeah.
Why are the cops calling me?
Tanner. Oh, that's hilarious. No, man. I mean, yeah, there's pros and cons to that, right? But it's good that, it seemed like, I mean, I would say, like, if you were kind of up in my area or neck of the woods, like, they might look for you for an hour.
Yeah, they're like, oh, he's gone.
Then again, I mean, I guess if it's that time of night and they can't get a hold of anybody, I could see them maybe, searching a little longer. But, it's like I said, man, on the flip side, had something happen to you, right? And you were kind of in distress out there, man. At least they're coming out checking on you too.
Yeah. They did a good job. They're okay. But one weird thing about me this season, though, is like I haven't really fished for northern pike. Earlier in the summer, I was fly fishing, and I caught a handful of them just on accident while I was topwater fishing for bass. But I haven't really I've caught a handful of big trout, and that's just big by my own standard. They're pretty small by other state standards. And but maybe I'll break away and get to fish for some pike this fall. I've had friends texting me like, hey, the pike are biting. And it's like, I've got a different goal right now. I don't want to pike clouding my judgment. And kind of one cool thing about the pike is I know where they live. They're going to be there for a considerable amount of time, hopefully. So
and they're always biting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The best thing about pike, though, is even if you see one or miss one, it'll be back. Like you can cast 100 times and it'll be there soon. It's not like a muskie where some horrible story where it follows and you never saw it again.
Yeah. So you're catching a lot of, like you said, big for your area trout. Like if my memory serves me correct, like Iowa's got a pretty stellar trout stocking program, right? To kind of like get these streams back to what they used to be back in the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't naturally have like rainbow and brown trout, of course, like especially brown trout, but we did have a natural population of brook trout, and actually there are a few streams here that still sustain some of those trout. And they really don't know how they ever got to Iowa. Settlers always like to move fish, but these were dated back a very long time. So they kind of proved that it couldn't have been settlers bringing them here. And at this point, we only stock like catchable sized rainbow trout. We actually have the brood stock too, that they release a few of those for people to catch. But about 10 years ago, they stopped stocking brown trout because of a lot of our cold water rivers took to them really well. And, brown trout can survive in some
warmer waters, right?
Yeah, a lot of water that brook trout definitely couldn't find acceptable, and rainbow would have a hard time. The other weekend, I fished a stretch of river, and all the rainbows were kind of stunted. So I don't know. My guess was it was a little too. I mean, if they would have got too warm, they would have been dead. But I don't know. It was just like maybe that was like a hard to sustain stretch for those rainbow, because everyone that I caught, and they were different ages, they were all just really like skinny and slender. But maybe there's another reason for that. But it was a weird little stretch of stunted rainbows.
Huh.
But our stocking programs are pretty cool. They release all the dates when they stock and where they're going to stock at. People follow them, and they fish those streams that day. There is a lot of unannounced stocking as well, so people aren't always chasing the stock truck. But we're really, really fortunate to have these stocking programs.
Yeah, I mean the couple of trips that I went over there to fly fish the driftless, like, it was incredible, man. You would walk the banks and then you would just stumble on some holes that, I mean, you could see 50, 60 fish just chilling.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, this is paradise. Like, and yeah, granted, like you said, like stockers, 10 to 12 inchers, but like catching a dozen 10 to 12 inchers on a fly rod, on a lightweight fly rod, is
It's a lot of fun.
It's a gas, like you can't beat that. But that's interesting. They stopped stocking the browns. That's cool that they took so well to that area that like they don't even have to stock them anymore. That's awesome.
It really is, and that's cool. When I'm catching some of these, my biggest brown trout this season was only 22 inches, but it's cool to think that a lot of those are like natural in their surroundings now. It's not one that just got dumped out of the stock truck. And
sure,
it's cool. That's kind of why I'm just targeting specifically brown trout. And in one of the rivers I've been fishing, there have been brown trout caught up to 28 inches, and I can't even, that 28-inch brown trout would dwarf any bass that you could catch around the area. And it's kind of just like, it blows our mind that there's trout so much bigger than our other game fish here. But I'm hoping to catch something 2 foot or better. That's kind of what my goal is. And I've had some hooked and they got off, and that's kind of what keeps me going. But I know if I keep grinding, I'll eventually get one, hopefully.
It's cool. That guy I was talking about earlier back in the forum days, man, like he knew where some big trout lived in Wisconsin, and he's got multiple 28 plus inch trout that he's caught up there, both on conventional and fly rod. But yeah, man, it's unique. Like I remember, and this guy's written some books too. His name's Len Harris, and it was unique to hear his perspective on those big trout. He's like, once you spot one, where that fish lives. Like they're not like deer, like during the rut, like traveling 10, 20 miles away, like usually those fish are sticking to that like small area. That's their home. They know there's food there, things like that, unless like something dramatic happens to that water level, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you wouldn't think of it, like we talked about earlier too, man. Like some of these streams, dude, you could like virtually jump across and there's giants living in there, and you would never expect it. Never expect it.
I'm always surprised by some of the big fish in these small streams. And I always had a lot of like stream improvement where they put undercut banks and stuff like that, and big fish can hide underneath those.
That's awesome.
I want to go back to how you talked about the fly fisherman getting kind of upset about him burning spots by posting stuff on the internet. And I have to kind of, Facebook and people just sharing places has put a lot of pressure on a lot of places. I mean, it's really, really cool that people are getting outdoors and exploring for themselves and stuff and finding these. But goodness, Facebook is a kind of a double-edged sword. It could also lead the wrong people to some of these places where they're going to leave it in a state less than what they found it as.
Yeah.
Sure.
Some of our trout streams have a lot of trash issues and just people being really disrespectful of the areas. So in all my posts, I leave where I am to speculation. For those who know where I'm at, they know, and they might message me or whatever. And there are people that message me like, hey, where are you? And I'll tell them, like, people that I trust and stuff that are going to, respect these places. But I try not to blow up spots. And another cool thing is the people that I'm friends with around some of these areas that I fish, I think that they kind of like that I'm not ripping their places up too. I mean, I am fishing them, but I'm not saying everybody come to spot X and fish, because there's a lot of good fishing. It's just like people need to get out and search for these places themselves. It's better if you figure out something for yourself rather than somebody's telling you it's a hot spot, because, I mean, it just depends on what a guy wants to do, but it's kind of cool to go and figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I just pulled up his Facebook page. I'm going to see if I can find one of these giant trout to show you.
Down here, Tanner, there's like 30-inch rainbows and browns.
Oh, yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, and of course, there's striper in there too, so there's some big old striper.
Oh, it was crazy. I remember the last time I was in Tennessee, I need to go back so bad, but how one river would have trout, you cross a hill, and like that river has muskie and everything else with the potential to have trout. And it was just like, just baffles me.
Here's a couple hammer handles. This is one. This guy takes a lot of guys out too up there.
That was a good one.
Couple of real tiger
That's a
trout.
tiger trout right there.
Yeah.
That's a cool one.
That's a big tiger trout too. That's the one JD's trying to find over in South Carolina. But
yeah, it's neat.
I mean, just some tanks, This guy did a little bit of guiding up there and stuff like that. But I mean, he's got a record for like just finding some big, just dainty trout, man.
There's some beautiful places, and just trout in general are pretty, but just the paint jobs on brown trout, oh, they're so cool how unique they all are.
Well, and I think there's some like it's almost like fingerprints, right? Like where the patterns on trout you'll never find one that's exactly the same as another one.
Totally unique to one another.
Yeah,
it's cool. Some of these places, I could take I take a lot of pictures of stuff, but if you go to the same stream next year and catch a big fish, there's a chance it's the same fish. And if you look at those markings, they can match up. Like there's people always catching muskies, and they can identify that it was recently caught because of, birthmarks or a scar or just their paint job or in general.
Yeah, it's so cool, man. Like I used to take a lot of like real close-ups of like just the pattern of a brown or a brookie even, and just like I used to have a couple of them printed in my old house, and it was just cool, man. Like the patterns on some of those fish are so vibrant and so many different colors,
kind of like even like a pumpkin seed bluegill.
Oh yeah, those ones.
Such a beautiful color. I mean, those are always so. I mean, even when they're small, they look so cool. The blues and the purples, the orange, yellows, and red. I mean, it's such a neat fish to look at.
I'm a big panfish guy too. Those are just totally breathtaking. We have a lot of beautiful panfish in Iowa, but the ones down south, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. But I'd like to thank you guys a lot for having me this evening. I'll always be happy to help you guys with anything, and you guys are always welcome in my area. And I'd like to hang out with you guys soon. Hey
man, we're the closest now. Jay moved farther away from both of us.
Yeah, it's true.
So anytime you want to hang out, dude, I'm down just so we could take a selfie together and I can send it to Jay and be like, yo, bro, you left. Look who I'm hanging out with,
Yeah, but you're gonna be like near snakes. spiders.
That's fine. I got Tanner there. Tanner will
I know.
be like my knight in shining armor. He's fearless. I'm good with that, dude.
Now I'll say, man, Tanner knows the area pretty well out there. It's cool. Like, I mean, you were a good steward when I was out there. I mean, all the stuff we did. There's just, there's a lot people just don't realize like what's out in Iowa, and especially when you're, homegrown or corn fed, so to speak, from the area. I mean, it's like, just some of the places we went were just like so amazing. It's just so cool. Just to experience that and everything. And me and you have been friends for a long time now, but I mean, yeah,
how
it's
many
like,
bass did we catch that first weekend that we hung out?
yeah, it was at Belvedere Lake, right? Isn't that what it was? Dude, that was like, I was getting tired. Like, I was like, all right, I've got enough fish. I mean, it's funny to say that, but we truly were just smoking them that day. And there was like nobody on the water. I mean, and that's Brian. If you really want to go to a cool lake, go to Belvedere, man.
We've talked about that because it's got the trees and stuff coming out of the water and things like that.
Camp right off the launch too.
That's awesome.
I gotta share one little bit about that lake. That is actually going to be one of Iowa's next walleye destination lakes.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, they've been stocking walleyes in that for quite a few years. I was actually ice fishing there, and the guy in the shanty next to me caught a 28-incher. And
wow.
At that time, I knew there was walleye in there, but I didn't know they were that big yet.
Yeah.
They did a study in Iowa of all the best. They wanted to start introducing walleyes to another lake, and Belvedere was really, really suitable, and it's going to be a good lake.
Is it really deep there?
There are some portions where it is mildly deep. I mean, I don't know, 50 feet deep maybe might be the deepest. I haven't been there, but there is a lot of water there.
Yeah, a lot of trees.
Cool.
It's crazy too, like how big these trees are, like, and still sticking out of the water.
Oh yeah,
you might be surprised at how many are gone now since you've been there. I mean,
really,
a lot of that stuff is starting to deteriorate, but it's still underwater, as you would find out really quick.
Great place to fish, though. I mean, it was really neat. But I mean, that place is Brian, it's within 4 hours of where you're at.
Right.
But I mean, it's
probably less than that.
Such a different place, than I've ever fished, and that was a cool time, man. That was a lot of fun. Getting out there and it's funny because like I've never seen anybody work a whopper plopper as fast as Tanner. Like literally, I think it was like a jet boat, and they were slamming that thing, dude. Slamming that thing.
Make them work for it.
Oh my god,
it had to be moving, huh? I like it.
But like I said, you guys are always welcome here, and I'd always be glad to help you with these paddle and fin podcasts. But I've got a river trip coming up this weekend, and today is actually my Friday, and I did a lot of work this week.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
be doing the rest of my packing this evening, so if we could cut this short, I'd be really thankful.
No, absolutely not. We're gonna hold you up, bro. We're gonna hold you
We've
up.
never had anybody try to run off the podcast, Tanner. He's like, I like you guys, but I gotta go.
In the past 2 days at work, I probably lifted 5 tons of material by myself.
Oh Jesus,
so
man.
I'm just like,
yeah, we totally get it, man. No, we appreciate you taking the time out to hop on with us tonight, man. Real quick before you go though, where can people follow you? Like, plug your social medias real quick, because if you're not following Tanner, go check out his Instagram. We pulled up a bunch of photos and stuff, and those listening on the podcast, I will put it in the show notes as well.
I think my Facebook handle is Tanman Yak Fisher. Otherwise, you can just Google Tanner Speidel. If you've got a fish in your photograph, I'll probably add you. It's part of being the outdoors fishing type of stuff. But if anybody ever has any questions about Iowa, feel free to reach out to me. I have some videos on YouTube too. I think it's just my name, Tanner Speidel. It's nothing crazy. I just have some highlights of my catches and my trips and stuff, more or less. I don't really talk in my videos, but feel free to check them out. Like I said, if anybody has any questions about Iowa or, what to expect when they go places, feel free to let me know. I'd be more than happy to help them out.
Right on, man. Right on. We appreciate you. Go get some rest, finish your packing, have an epic weekend, dude, and catch that 24.
I hope so. If not, it's okay. I hope my buddy catches some big fish. He doesn't fish as much as me, so when we're on these trips, sometimes it's like I want to see him take the big fish because he's going to get some good pictures of it.
That's awesome, man. Awesome. Right on, man. We appreciate you, dude. Good luck, and we will catch up with you soon, my friend.
Thanks, guys.
See you, Tanner.
Take it easy, man.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I was going to say there's still so much to talk to him about that. I mean, he hunts too and everything. I mean, like I said, he's truly an outdoorsman. Like the stuff, even to the extent of, geological, stuff like picking up rocks. And I mean, he like knows all kinds of stuff when you're out in the woods. I was like, I feel like I'm totally lacking, I'm pretty sure if the lights go out, Tanner will survive. Me, we're like 50. I'm gonna have to steal some stuff, but like, I don't know. But Tanner, dude, you throw him out in the middle of the woods, I think he's gonna be fine.
Yeah, but that's super unique, right? Because a guy like that is a guy I want to hang out with and spend some time in the woods to learn those things, and especially like learning a whole new area, so to speak, like he said, he wants to know Iowa like the back of his hand, and it's super cool to be able to do that, and just the amount of time he spends out there exploring and stuff. So,
and he's seriously driven. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
When we were even on Belvedere, like he mentioned, he was chasing like a 20-inch fish, and he's like, I'm not leaving here until I catch this fish. And I'm like, Tanner, it's dark. Like, I'm like, I was like, there's like a forest we got to pedal through to get home. Like, like, I was like, and I'm dumb and don't have a headlamp, so I'm like, yeah. I mean, he's driven, man. I mean, he'll just keep going and going and going. And I think that's one of the biggest attributes to him is he'll set his mind to something and then he just goes.
Yeah.
He doesn't stop, So and that's cool. That's why you always see results from him too.
Yeah. Well, in his photography's on point, and it's one of those things like we talked to JD last week with his company Immersive, right? Like he's like, I want you to feel like you're immersed in the photo and what I'm doing. And I get that feeling every time I look at Tanner's stuff,
Yeah, he gets a lot of cool shots. A lot.
Really, really good stuff. Yep. And it's just like you see his name pop up in your feed and you're like, all right, where's Tanner today? And it's cool to see that. I love following guys like that because I don't get out to adventure some of those things as much as I'd like to. So being able to see it from somebody else's point of view as well is super unique and cool. So, but well, Mr. Randall, another one in the books.
Yes,
Final
sir.
Thoughts.
No, it's cool talking to Tanner. I haven't talked to him in a while. It's always good to hear his little adventures and everything because he's always doing something different. So it's cool, and I'd like to see him again, but man, it's going to be a minute before I get anywhere. I know that.
That's what happens when you move far, far away.
Yeah, but now I'm in a vacation destination. So now I can be like, because remember, we've had this talk. You could never get anybody to come to Illinois. Nobody wanted to come to Illinois. But now I'm in Tennessee.
I usually don't have that problem because I'm on the Illinois-Wisconsin border.
That's true. Like
I just go, hey, bro, we drive 10 minutes. We take a left out of my neighborhood and drive about 10 minutes. We're over the Wisconsin border. We're good.
Yeah,
we're good.
I know. I was in stupid Chicago suburbia. So
yeah, nobody wants to go to Chicago.
Yeah,
I mean,
nobody does. Not even people in Chicago want to be in Chicago.
Murder capital of the world, basically. So
no, but it's it. Like I said, man, I was actually he knows, but I'd invite him out here too. I'm sure he'd come out here, and I mean, again, we got Watts Bar right down the. I mean, I would say right down the street, but it's like 30 minutes from here.
Sure.
And it's like there's a lot of
you got so much stuff around.
There's tons of what is it? A lot of destinations where some of the biggest fishing tournaments like hit within an hour, like an hour's drive from me, for the most part. So, but anyway,
right on.
Man. So we got to go into hunting mode, I think.
Rami said, awesome podcast, guys. Can't wait for the next one. Appreciate
Thank you,
it,
Rami.
brother.
Yes,
Appreciate
sir.
it, man. Good stuff, man. We will see you guys next week. We're here every Thursday live on Facebook and YouTube, 7 Central, 8 Eastern, 5 o'clock out on the West Coast. And if not, you can always pick it up on the old podcast platforms Thursday evening, Friday morning, whatever works for you. So hope you guys enjoyed that one. Always great hearing from Tanner. And we'll see you boys and girls on the next one. As always, tight lines, smooth paddling. Peace. Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode here on Paddle and Fin. Be sure to drop a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or smash that subscribe button on any platform you're listening in on. Be sure to check us out on Waypoint TV, waypointtv.com. Make sure you sign up for the Fantasy Kayak Fishing League at paddleandfin.com/fantasy. You can support this show through Patreon, patreon.com/paddleandfin. Don't forget to check out the website, paddleandfin.com. Catch us on YouTube. If you got a question, comment, or want to see a future guest on the show, be sure to email us at paddleandfin@gmail.com. Shout out to our show supporters, Yak Gadget. You can check out all the fine kayak accessories at yakgadget.com. Pelican Professional. For all your cases, coolers, and lighting needs, go to pelican.com. Rocktown Adventures, your Midwest premier paddle sports destination. Go to rocktownadventures.com. Eastport Marina, the beautiful destination on Dale Hollow Lake. If you're looking for lodging, kayaks, kayak accessories, or anything fishing related on the beautiful Dale Hollow Lake, go to eastport.info. And Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and fill your tackle boxes